It is a special edition of the Landscape and Garden Show with Bob and BT here on the Alive and Social Network. Podcast number 1. Did you like the gravitas there, Bob Harvey? Podcast number 1. You know what that implies, don't you?
That there's more to come.
Yes, sir!
We've only just begun
to podcast.
From our front porch,
muffins and
all
coffee
are welcome.
Here. We're kind of going on different tangents lyrically speaking, but, that's not a surprise. That's not a surprise at all. Good to see you, my friend.
It's great to see you in such a wonderful environment on a great Saturday morning. It's ideal outside. Is it not ideal?
Oh, it's just a beautiful, beautiful summer morning and a pleasure to be on your porch. I love porches. I mean, I think when it comes to architectural elements at homes, the porch is among my favorite.
Well, you know the story behind this porch. It has a very unique story. At one time, this porch did not exist here in Linden Hills.
And this was, as I recall you saying, this house that you live in was a duplex. Then you converted it into a single-family dwelling.
That's right. That's the only way we could afford to stay in Linden Hills with 5 children.
How many are awake in the Harvey house right now, and how many are still sleeping?
I think 2 are awake, and 2 are awake, 2 are sleeping, and 1 is down in Owatonna at a baseball tournament.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And you were down there last night for that, weren't you?
And they won.
Very good. We love hearing news about that. Good reports from the baseball world. Speaking of, since we have this verdant green lawn at Casa Harvey in front of us in the beautiful Linden Hills neighborhood, I want to throw a nod to our Minnesota Twins as we're doing the show here on July 25th.
Yes.
The Bronx Bombers get bombed at Target Field. 10-1 the final score. 4 home runs for our Minnesota Twins. Miguel Sano with a homer. But moreover, our fond Torrey Hunter tying Kirby Puckett's home run record with a Twins uniform. Kirby with 207, and now Torrey with 207. 10-1 over the Yankees. Oh, welcome to the Mini Apple, Big Apple dudes.
That's right.
Hi. Didn't mean to spoil your bunch. Hello. 10-1's a great score. God, was that just wonderful.
I couldn't believe that. That was awesome.
I was doing stuff with pals, but had it on the radio. And when I had to sneak down to the Daddy Fridge, we had game night last night, and the Daddy Fridge is down in the laundry room. So I kept the Twins game on in the and I would occasionally get a text from Mrs. T saying. You could actually hear the in the text, which was, when are you coming back upstairs? Because I'm down there kind of sipping a cold one in the Daddy Fridge laundry room, pretending to futz, but no, I'm just kind of listening to the ball game there. I had to keep my attention a little tuned into that. This neighborhood of yours, as I mentioned, the verdant green of your lawn here in Linden Hills, this is just an outstanding neighborhood that you live in, Bob Harvey. We're doing this porch cast. Hi, folks. We're doing a porch cast. Little lawn and little landscape and garden porch cast here. It's people strolling by constantly. The sidewalks are just filled with folks walking their dogs and just making their way to maybe one of the restaurants or the hardware store or a farmer's market perhaps in Linden Hills. Who knows? Creative Kids stuff I know is down there. And it's just a neighborhood filled with activity. It's just so fun to see this kind of urban action going on here in beautiful Linden Hills.
You think we had staged it. I mean, just as we're talking, all these people are coming by and everything. It's like they got the cue or something. There's a director out there. But
Older man with dog just made his way by, too. This director is amazing. He's got his megaphone and his canvas high chair there. Just wonderful.
If you can just kind of paint the picture of what it is to be on the porch. In the design world, we call this prospect refuge.
Prospect refuge.
Prospect refuge in the design world of landscape architecture. You create a space that's kind of in between fully indoors and fully outdoors. Hence, we have the porch.
Right.
And when we bought this house, as you know, it was a duplex. It had no porch, and in essence, it had no face. It really had its back turned to the street.
Sure.
I mean, you didn't know what was going on out here because you really couldn't even see it from the inside. So with all the changes and everything, we had this beautiful front porch, and now we get to enjoy and take it in this prospect refuge place.
It's sort of an in-between thing, then. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, a transition space, but it's an active transition space.
We can look out and observe everything, and depending on how much lushness with the plants and the vines and that kind of thing, people necessarily don't have to see us or have to say hello or engage, but they can, depending on the degree of which we are available to be seen.
Sure.
So in our situation, in this design approach, we like to be seen. We are very front porch people. Hence, we live in the front of our house most of the time. So our dining room, our living room, our kitchen looks out to the front street, which faces north, which faces right into where the intersection of Washburn and 43rd comes. So we get to watch the world go by literally every single day. So then again, extending that whole design thing, 11 years ago when we moved here, there was some color and a few gardens around. Some of the neighbors were doing something. But since then, when we started working on our project, and our next door neighbor at that time was George Miller, who had an absolutely phenomenal landscape and a conservatory on the front of his house. He was the first person to kind of blaze the trail of really experiencing the neighborhood from the front of the house. And then we kind of followed suit. And since then, it has just been one after another. So now, as you know, when you came here this morning, if you look up and down the street, you see lots of gardens, lots of color. And we're looking out on our gardens here and our planters. And with 5 boys, I managed to do just enough in the front to make everybody believe that the back looks the same way.
Where the trampoline
However,
lives.
You did notice the no trespassing sign, right?
Do not pay
no
attention to the man behind the curtain
Yes.
or the lawn behind the curtain. No, pay no attention. But you got an active family, like you said.
We do.
5 boys. You got the trampoline set up back there. If it's going to get the grass a little worn because those boys are out there having fun and bringing their pals over and enjoying themselves, that's what a landscape needs to take into account.
A landscape
as well.
needs to address all the different issues of a family's needs, the occupant's needs, and the ensuing chapters that occur. Things keep moving and changing all the time, even from year to year. And so you're always anticipating what will the uses be a year from now, or 2 years, or 5 years from now. And so the front stays pretty much like my outdoor sanctuary, and the back is open to activity, basically focused around sports and whatever. We have a trampoline, a basketball hoop. We have neighbors. We you know, it's as our neighbors can attest here. We have one of our neighbors we should introduce. Don't you think?
It's Jennifer Dubé, who lives next door in the house that George Miller really started. Jen, is George was the guy that you bought the house from? Then,
that's right. George had passed, and we purchased the house 2 years ago, and we've been in there since, getting to know the Harveys very well, and
nice.
Sharing a driveway with them has been. It's just been a wonderful experience, and the house and the gardens that we've kept up pretty well, and Bob's been a big help in that area.
Right on. Bob and I have talked about your house before and about George and you and your family, and I want to bring up this conservatory that Bob mentioned a second ago, because so often in landscape design or home and landscape design, that rascal gets put in the backyard. It gets tucked away out of sight, and this is integrated into the very front of your home, and it pushes out like Bob's porch here.
That's right.
Into the neighborhood, into this whole urban scene, this neighborhood urban scene that's in front of us. And I imagine for you, like Bob's porch, it's got to be just a connector to the folks that you live around and enjoy having around.
It is. It's a 4-season porch. It's got its own heat and its own air.
Love it.
But so we're able to spend every month on this porch, but it's fully full windows on the roof and on part of the walls, and so we get to see out, and folks who come over just can't believe how cool and interesting the room is. Most of the time I like to spend is when it's raining or when it's snowing. I can't tell you how many times I've fallen asleep while it's raining in that room.
And it is. It's like being in a snow globe. You go over,
Sure.
the snow's coming down. It's like, okay, we're going over to Jen and Ryan's and watch the snow come down.
That's great. Well, porches, too. I mean, it's my favorite thing, whether it's a conservatory type of building or hexagon shape in the backyard, front yard, or attached to your house, or a porch like Bob has. A rain shower a good book, a comfortable place to sit down and then maybe lay back, and then probably nod off. I mean, it's some of the most amazing dreams and sleep that you could ever have is being out in nature but being protected and covered. And I can only imagine what it's like having that cover, the roof, being all glass in your case.
Yeah. If you're into the airplanes, you get to see the airplanes flying over, which I quite enjoy.
And we can hear them here on the Porchcast,
You can hear them here. Or our daughter, who's 6, we play a lot of games out there. That's kind of the game room, and it's just wonderful.
Can we introduce
Sophia,
our adoptive little sister that Ryan share with us, or that Ryan and Jen share with us? Little Sophia, because she's a very active part of the garden, I want you to know. And we should talk a little bit about that.
That sounds good. Sophia, you see that? Your mom's talking into one microphone. You can just talk into that one, but just talk to us. You don't have to worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal.
If you want to say hello, say hello.
Hi.
She has a big strawberry in her mouth
going
right
on.
now.
Well, maybe we'll coax something out of her a little later. Do you think so? Maybe Oscar the dog can come over and talk into the microphone? Do you think you can get him to bark into that microphone for us? You do? All right. Very good. Can I call you Sofa Bofaloaf? Will that work? No? No? I kind of rhyme things sometimes. No? Okay, well, maybe I'll think up a different one.
Back to the porch and the rain falling. When you're outside, like in our setting here, that porch over there, or the swing over there that my wife is on right now, that's my sleeping chair.
That's the one, yeah.
And when we designed this porch, we knew we had to measure in such a way to make sure there was room for a nice swing. It goes all the way back to my childhood, and a lot of people can attest to that. When you put a swing on a porch, there's something about that.
Agreed, my friend. Or certainly a glider.
Yes.
If you're unable to hang,
rocking chairs
from the rafters or whatever. Yeah, just something. Rocking chairs, just something that you get a little motion on that porch. That's sort of an essential part of the respiration, I guess, the relaxation respiration that comes from gentle movement when you're in a place like this or
decompression.
A setting like this.
I call it.
Yeah, absolutely. That Prospect Refuge needs a little bit of that back and forth when it comes to just how your body and your mind behave. Jennifer, I like what's happened here. Bob, did you help with adding a little privacy to the conservatory? Because there's a beautiful tree and a planting area, really in front of it. The tree isn't so large that you can't see through it, but it does provide a certain measure of that privacy that I think when you live in a glass room, you'd want a little bit of that.
I planted that tree about 4 years ago. That is a yellow butterfly's magnolia. So in the spring, it blooms just a little bit later than the other magnolias that we're used to seeing.
Yep.
It's full of creamy, buttery yellow, tulip-shaped flowers that are just beautiful. They come out on the tree before the leaves do. And It is. It's a very, with something so beautiful and kind of European looking. It's an elegant.
With 3 stems coming out of the ground like that. Mm-hmm. That's just lovely.
It's really hard to have the balance between seeing out and having people see in. So
sure.
You have the combination of the trees and you can pull the blinds if you need to, but most of the time they're open.
Yeah, I would imagine, because you just want to soak it all in.
Exactly.
Do you grow plants inside there, too?
Oh, they thrive in that room.
Now I'm looking over, because it's behind me as we're doing the Porchcast here, so I'm going to just move away from the mic real quick to take a look. And, yeah, they are. I can
plants
see them now.
Plants thrive in there.
Yeah,
they just
I can
love
only
it.
imagine.
Well, the other thing, too, is you talk about how landscapes and gardens are memory makers. They create ritual. We talk about ritual and how important it is in our lives in different ways, and with the change of the seasons and being outdoors and doing all the different things. Landscape is one of those, gardens are one of those really important. It plays an important role, whether from a spectator standpoint or an activist standpoint, whether you're out there in the gardens or you're just admiring some of the aspects of them. Our oldest son has autism and is very, very interested in tropical plants. Mm-hmm. So when Jen and Ryan moved in, one of his forms of expression of welcome to the neighborhood was, can I put some of my palm trees in your conservatory?
How about that? Nice. You just asked. Yeah, that's great.
And so it's kind of fun. Plants do that. They bond people. There's a connection, and it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Just little things like that. So it's a fun thing to have, anything grows in that conservatory.
Bob, this Linden Hills neighborhood, you moved here 11 years ago? Is that what you said?
We moved here 11 years ago from about 8 blocks away.
Got it. This Linden Hills neighborhood really seems to do a great job of slowing down the pace of human and car interaction. And one thing that I remember, and I'm trying to earmark the years that it happened, or the year, but on almost every intersection here in front of your house and elsewhere are these delightful little planting circles that just slow everything down and certainly offer a beautiful visual element. But I like how, more than anything, it slows traffic down as you approach those intersections, which, of course, are key human meets vehicle points in the road surface. How long have those been here?
They were there before we moved in, and because of the pre-existing condition of the road, specifically the width of the road, it's not exactly ideal in terms of how it functions. Many cars do hit it, unfortunately, and knock the signs over, but it has a traffic calming
it sure does.
Quality to it, and because we kind of gussy it up with plantings, flowers, seasonal changes, then people do pause or do slow down because they're distracted in a good way by the appearance. They know it's there.
Yeah.
And so our goal is to keep it looking in a positive way, like something that they need to be cautious about, but yet enjoy at the same time.
So let me ask you, do you take that upon yourself? Oh,
that's
wonderful.
That.
You've got the one in front of your house, and there are others on the street.
And we work on some of those as well, and we do some work
great.
right up in the village with streetscape and that kind of thing. So, we have a really neat history here working with the city and the park board. And back in 2008, I started a campaign called Re-Elming the Twin Cities. And that all came out of my senior thesis project back in Vermont was on urban forestry. And one of my references actually resides here in the Twin Cities. His name is Don Willicke of Willicke and Daniels, and he was the spearheader and the proponent for preserving our urban forest, slowing down the spread of Dutch elm disease, and what are we going to do when the trees are gone? So planning efforts for replanting and using new hybrid disease-resistant elms and other types of trees to basically prepare ourselves for deforestation from the massive monoculture that we have with just elm.
Right. And then so try to stay ahead of the curve, too.
Exactly. So I joined forces with the park board, and we actually are responsible for, out of several hundred new American elm hybrids that are planted around the Twin Cities, most specifically here in Linden Hills, down by Lake Harriet, and here in Linden Hills and the parks and so forth. So it's kind of fun to watch these trees grow and create a new generation. And working also to create participate in the master plan of the plantings here in Linden Hills, where we don't create other monocultures of the same trees on all the blocks, but actually incorporate some variety and complements of different trees that can grow together on the same street. And then we don't run into that same problem.
That monoculture problem, sure. Plus, it gives you a new opportunity to create a new aesthetic for the streetscape as well, for the boulevard part of the streetscape.
And we're using our boulevards now differently than we did in decades past. We are really becoming very social. It's the whole idea of people living more in the front of their homes. So when you're in a business district or you live near one, you see people spending more time outside on the boulevards, on the sidewalks, wherever there's room. Every little inch is so valuable, where we can put a little table or a couple chairs and create some social interaction. That just seems to be the way that things have moved, which is a real positive thing.
I love seeing that, especially in those dense urban areas that often are maligned in regard to news stories and people speaking about them. And I'm using North Minneapolis as an example in this regard. I live in New Hope. I work in downtown Minneapolis, the North Loop neighborhood. So I often take Golden Valley Road through North Minneapolis to Penn, and then Penn over to Plymouth and the backside of downtown, so to speak, and there's my workplace. And I was so entranced by this beautiful pair of houses next door to each other with amazing boulevard plantings. When we're done with the Porchcast today, I'll show you the pictures because I was so entranced that I knew I had a few extra minutes driving in to do my radio show that day. So I took a left, looped all the way around the block so I could come back and park close to the front of those two houses. And they had the boulevard from curb to sidewalk absolutely beautifully jam-packed with all manner of flowers and plants, a lot of bee-friendly flowers.
I was going to say,
there too,
a lot
so
of
that
those
was super.
Natives, things that can handle the stressful conditions of the boulevard.
Yep, and then moreover, since these were sort of postage stamp-sized front yards, they went from their respective fence lines then, where the sidewalk ends and it goes to the front of their house. All of that was jam-packed with just as much as they had on the boulevard. So literally from the curb with just a little blank for the sidewalk, and then from the fence all the way to the front and around the sides of both houses, nothing but beautiful plantings. So it was just a cornucopia of color and shape and size and design, just fantastic. And so the more of that kind of stuff that can be integrated into that urban landscape, but especially that boulevard, people were just really appreciate it, especially in this sort of setting where, there's a lot of sidewalk activity, but also especially, as I said, in those areas that in this city or others that tend to be looked at as, well, nothing's going on, or that's a crime-ridden part of the city, or there's problems in that part of the city. And to see those little oases, those little oases of color and beauty really adds an element to it.
They where there are space limitations, people will move to the boulevards and do, if they have very small lots or whatever, and it's a really neat thing. When you talk about low maintenance and stuff, but we think of a lot of people don't have time to garden, but they do enjoy it, and people have second homes or cabins up north, that kind of thing. They want to see some color and that kind of stuff, but they don't want to have the high maintenance. And a lot of these boulevard plantings will be planted with plant material that requires little maintenance. There's always some involved, but a lower maintenance thing. And we can look at some of those options in terms of other landscapes, too.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to get into that on the Landscape and Garden Show with Bob and BT here in just a bit. The whole cabin thing, because I've got so many pals that reach out to me knowing that we do this show together, and they're bothered by the fact that they go up to their cabin and they're spending 4 or 5 hours almost every Friday night or Saturday just kind of taking care of more lawn and more things than they want to. They'd just soon be enjoying some time out on the lake. Let's get to that in a second. But I wanted to ask you and Jennifer Dubé here, your neighbor, you brought up I brought up the butterfly and bee plants that were on that boulevard in North Minneapolis. And what I want to ask you, are you seeing more butterflies, the yellow swallowtails, some monarchs and such, especially from the perspective of this glass conservatory room that you spend a lot of time in? Are you looking out? Are you seeing more of them this year compared to others?
Yeah, I mean, we've been over here a couple of years, and we've seen, Sophia's always looking out for them.
Sure,
So,
she's 6 years old, so that's something that's eye candy to her in a big way.
We're definitely seeing the butterflies and the bees in our neighborhood.
How about you, Bob? Because you're out in the landscape working with your peeps and really experiencing it more so than a lot of folks. Are you seeing more of them too?
This past week particularly, a lot of swallowtails and monarchs just loading onto all the beautiful plantings, the perennials, the things that are blooming that we'll talk about, what's in bloom now, that's attracting these butterflies. And then also the bee population, just bumblebees by the thousands and thousands. Not as many honeybees, but we are seeing them, thankfully. We are seeing them out there, and then all the other different types of bees that are pollinators. Very busy, and they have plenty of options to pollinate from. So
we talked about this, I think show 2 or 3, because bees and butterflies came up, and I'm still considering it. I don't think I have the time this year, but I do want to do the setup. I've got one corner. It would be the northwest corner of my house, my yard, where it's kind of tucked away. I've got pine tree there. I've got another serviceberry tree there. So it's sort of tucked away, and there's a bit of a slope there. But I do want to do an urban hive there. I've been dying to put a beehive back in that corner because, again, it's like the 4 corners of Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. It's tucked in everybody's corner of their yard. So having a beehive there would really be sort of an isolated thing for all of the neighbors. I think I think there would be no bothersome, oh, there's bees here. You know, it's tucked away in the back of the yard. And so I'm just, I love honey, first off. And I think that'd be a fun element to add to my my gardening and critter campaign. And then you can share that stuff, too. You know, bring some over to Jen's house.
Sounds like a great idea.
Hang out in the conservatory there. Get Ryan out there and Jen and Sophia, and we'll have a couple of crumpets and
some honey.
And some fresh honey on there. That could be a lot of fun. I gotta have a little fun at my dear show partner's expense. Yeah. When I look at this lawn here, in my mind's eye, I see Bob Harvey on all fours with a ruler and a small scissors, you know, and just down there like one at a time, just clip. This lawn is so precise. And Bob, I know, being the perfectionist that he is, from time to time, I can see him going, "Oh, I'm a micron off. I got to start over again."
I didn't see you over here at 6:30 this morning.
I could have used a little help. I do have 2 rulers and 2 scissors, Mr. Turner.
Nah.
I'm throwing some praise at you now, Bob. It just is precise and lovely. But you know what? It's also it also just has a nice lived-in feel to it as well.
Exactly.
And,
I want you to look.
It's
a little
not
more
too precise.
Exactly.
And that's what's cool about it.
And the lawn is a good offset to the landscape and the gardens. And we have a simple display in the front, but it's a very friendly display. It invites interaction from people going by. And as you can see in the lawn, even though it's clipped very well, that we have our clover.
I was just going to comment on that you didn't do, you know, you're not going too crazy on the perfect, you know,
it's not
golf course sort of lawn look. No, it's natural looking. It's
and that's okay.
urban looking.
I in the spring there were violets coming up in the lawn. A lot of people don't like that, and there's certain lawn settings I can understand the pristine thing, particularly like golf courses and those kinds of places, more public and campus locations, but where there's more of a relaxed approach, it works just fine. And you know what? Frankly, people are too busy looking at all the other beautiful things that are in color and bloom to worry about if there's clover in the lawn.
There's a lot of distress. Well, and you got to give a little something for the pollinators,
right?
And the bunnies. The bunny's got to be happy, too.
That's right.
Anyhow, just nice job and well-maintained and just some lovely roses here and just a cross-section of that trumpet vine coming out of the planter there is just delightful.
And you're surrounded by wisteria.
And I got the wisteria behind me, which is one of my favorite plants. So.
That gives us our west shade in the afternoon. That comes up every year. We have it on fish line, and then we just disconnect it and coil it up at the base of the porch, for the fall and winter, and then pull those back up again.
Cover it up somehow,
just a little bit with some leaves and stuff because we want to get a lot of blooms, and it's still kind of young, even though it's pretty viney right now. But by about the 3rd or 4th year, it's really producing a lot of blooms. So those will go back down, and then we have to make way for the other holidays with garlands and lights and things like that. So
those are some steady. I'm just reaching over and touching it. Those are some steady, sturdy vines there.
Yeah,
they really got a lot of strength to them.
Yeah, so they give a nice. They frame the conservatory very nice there to the west.
Indeed. As I'm looking at the treescape out here, I see some. I see maple. I see some elm action, other stuff, and certainly the linden. So going back to the Linden Hills neighborhood that you're in here, is it still populated by a lot of lindens? I mean, I see some here, obviously in front of your house, but across the neighborhood, are we looking at a lot of lindens still?
Yes, there's
a beautiful tree.
There is a predomination in many parts of the neighborhood of the lindens, and about 3 weeks ago, they were in full regalia with the bloom, and so it was a real sweet smell in the evenings. And we actually had some nice cooler evenings where people, if you left your windows open and stuff, you could smell the sweetness of the linden trees. But no, there's a good eclectic mix. I've got a good old Vermont sugar maple in the front of my house. I had to plant as a connection back to your home
turf, right. Had to be a Vermonter.
And then the Christmas tree over here, the Serbian spruce, which is a type of spruce that does well in our environment. The spruce family is a broad family of evergreens, and we find in our experience that the native Norway spruce work really well because they're used to our climate. They're not going to lose their branches and die back at the bottom like a lot of the Colorado blues and those kinds. They're very they're not well suited for our climate because of our high humidity.
Sure.
And in some cases, they work fine in the right location where there's a lot of hot, dry afternoon sun. But the Serbian spruce is more of a diminutive size Christmas tree type evergreen that doesn't get too big for small yards, and you can put your lights out on it in the winter and that kind of thing.
Stays nicely shaped as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we see some runners out here that had a race. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning to you.
Welcome to our porch cast. How was the race?
Hot. It was hot. I'm sure it was. Yeah.
So we get a lot of runners and racers parking as far as our house when they're doing runs at Lake Harriet and stuff.
Sure.
And then, of course, they get to enjoy all the amenities after their race, so it's really fun.
If you're a runner, parking far away from the race site seems to be hand in glove. So all right, why would you complain about not being able to park close? I mean, it's part of the. I've always been surprised when people go to the gym or the YMCA and they're driving around looking for the closest spot. Isn't that counterintuitive?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to grab the furthest one away and kind of get a little more aerobics and cardio?
And what's even funnier is those who don't have the handicap thing in their thing. They'll actually, to get close enough, they'll park in the handicap to go work out.
The irony should not be lost on
us. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Hi,
Golden.
Should not be lost.
That's one of our neighborhood boys that comes. Lives close to us and one of my son's friends.
Very cool. So. Very cool.
But that's the kind of thing, there's always activity going on, and it's a great way to start the day on a weekend when you can be home and watch the world wake up.
We need to talk about an invasion. We'll talk about an invasion after I throw some props to the Twin Cities Hit Show here on the Alive and Social Network. Rusty Gatenby and Friends, Monday through Thursday mornings at 9:30. You can listen to the stream live. They bring you a whole bunch of pop culture and things that are happening in the news cycle from the previous day. But also, you should visit those guys at the Chart House in Lakeville because they do a live show at the Chart House in Lakeville every Thursday evening. Live musical guests. Kat Perkins has swung by and joined in. Many other great talent here in the Twin Cities.
How about you? You get down there and sing?
I have not. I have not made my way down there and sang as yet, Bob Harvey. Only because you and I were not available to do our classic duet.
We can do that.
So we'll just have to get the schedules aligned and make our way to the Chart House. My good pal owns that shop, so it's really always fun to visit those guys, and it's always fun to listen to the Twin Cities Hit Show, whether it's mornings or especially 5 o'clock on Thursdays, and have some fun here with the Alive and Social Network. Just stream the show and enjoy your listening experience. The invasion. Is it? Didn't you have a question about political correctness or incorrectness?
I did. I just wanted to, we that work in the landscape horticulture industry know all about the Japanese beetles. So the Japs are back.
Oh no!
Yep, the Japanese beetles back.
I don't think it's politically incorrect in the landscape paradigm to refer to the Japanese beetles in that shorthand fashion. It's not a pejorative as it relates to a race or a culture of people.
No.
You're talking about a critter that we don't want to have around, and so...
I'm still looking for that person out there that can honestly look me in the face and say, I love Japanese beetles.
They're just the best.
They're so pretty. They have that reflective quality. They almost glow in the dark.
Oh, yeah. Aren't they gorgeous?
And the bigger they get from eating all of my plants, the happier they seem to be. And then there's more of them.
You'll never hear that said.
No.
I don't think you'll ever hear that said.
No, in fact, again, at 6:30 this morning when maybe you were here watching, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was smashing away on the Japanese beetles.
The restraining order only kicks in starting at 7:30. So, I might have been there, Bob.
No, the Japanese, in talking on a horticultural note here briefly, probably the hot topic of conversation right now for all of us who do any kind of horticultural and food production activities and are seeing as things come into maturity we're harvesting and that kind of thing. And the Japanese beetles have a broad range of plant material that they like to attack.
Did they piggyback over on some plants years ago? Is that what brought them over to the shores here, or were they brought over in one of those misaligned ways of we'll bring this in because it's going to eat this, and then suddenly the Japanese beetles get out of control? Or what brought them to our shores?
I don't know the specific instance when it occurred, but I can tell you they are imported.
All right, yeah, I figured as much.
Yes. This is one case where imports are not highly regarded.
Right on.
So anyway, they're about 3/8 of an inch long, and they have that metallic green color, and their wings are kind of shiny bronze, and they create a lot of damage. So what they'd like to do is they'd like to feed on the leaves between the veins of plants. So when they are finished, they leave a skeleton of brown fibers where the leaves used to be. A type of damage referred to as skeletonizing. So you'll see it really common on our beloved linden trees here in Linden Hills, as well as raspberry bushes.
Yep.
So people are growing raspberries.
I've had that happen before.
Yes. And then they also eat flowers like roses and stuff. They weaken the plant overall if there's a heavy infestation, and obviously aesthetically very unattractive. So, but people need to understand the whole kind of cycle that the Japanese beetle participates in. And again, we always want to get more on the front end, the preventative end. Immediately when you see them, you need to physically remove them.
Is that it? Is that the best mitigation
for people
plan?
Who are going mostly non-chemical, organic approach, that is just, where there's not that many, just every day, daily, either in the early morning or the evening when their activity is slowed. That's when you want to take them out.
And if you're getting them early in the seeing them part of the gardening narrative, are you getting them before they have an opportunity to not only munch but then lay eggs and create more of those rascals? Is that part of that too?
The more that you pull them off, the faster you pull them off, the more you interrupt that next cycle, because it takes just a few weeks before the next generation is born.
Sure.
So, but they start as grubs in the soil and in our turf grass. So in the spring, they move near the soil surface where they finish feeding and pupate. They emerge as adults in late June or July and can fly a long distance to suitable feeding sites. When adults are feeding on a shrub, it emits a pheromone that attracts
more guys, come
beetles.
On, hey.
So that is why you do not want to use Japanese beetle traps, because what that is kind of a
concentrated Japanese
smell-alike
beetle
pheromone, and you're just like, it's a party. It's not a porch cast, it's a beetle cast, right? Yeah, so do not use those Japanese, unless you're going to put it so far away that... but you don't even want to keep it within the same, like on city lots kind of thing. Yeah. There isn't a distance far enough away.
And you would have to empty that out really regularly to prevent that sort of clustering effect that the pheromones are going to cause.
And see, when the beetle emits that pheromone, it tells the other beetles this is where the party is. So they can literally concentrate on one area of your yard and leave another area alone, because that's where the other beetles are told to go, so, kind of thing.
Do any of them have a Liverpool accent? I couldn't prevent that. You've been saying beetle for the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, these are the ones.
What did you think would happen?
Well, after mating, the adult females lay up to 60 eggs in your turf grass.
There you go.
So the eggs hatch in about 1 to 2 weeks, and the grubs feed on the roots of the grasses and other plants. So when you keep looking out and seeing your grass, it's turning brown, I'm watering it, and it's turning brown. That's because it doesn't have any roots left. The grubs are literally down there eating the root systems off the bottom of the grass.
So when they're in that stage, is there any kind of natural or homeopathic lawn treatment that you can do? I mean, we're always trying to avoid the chemicals, and we'll use them judiciously when they're necessary. But I know a lot of folks that listen to the podcast and get into the garden world want to try to start with something natural first. Is there anything at all?
No, for a topical approach, we have neem oil, which is it extracts like zatatrictin. They've been known to provide short-term protection, especially if only small to moderate numbers of Japanese beetles are present. There are several contact residual insecticides, including permethrin, bifenthrin, malathion, and carbaryl. And when using these, read and follow the labels because some of these could not be used on plants that have fruit that you would be eating, like raspberries. Yeah. So, but going further back in the cycle, if you think about if they're coming out of the lawn as grubs and pupating into these beetles and then feeding and then perpetuating the cycle again, you want to get rid of the host site.
Right.
You want it. So what you do is you put an application on the lawn in the midsummer. You could a couple times a summer where it changes the conditions at which the grubs can grow. And I think it has a lot to do with the pH.
Now you're answering my question.
I don't know the name of the product off the top of my hand or my head, but I will get it for the next time. But we've used this. Or the companies that I work with will go and put this application down when they do their other applications of fertilizer, et cetera. And it just makes the lawn inhospitable for the grubs to form. Mm-hmm. So then you're reducing, but you need a collaborative effort. So if you live in a neighborhood and there's 8-12 lawns on your block, if everybody does this, it has a pretty strong impact.
Yeah, good potential to mitigate the problem for everyone.
Right.
But otherwise, you got to get out there and just pick them off the plants.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you
just crush them in your finger right away, or what do you?
Yeah. And then I pull, and then I remove that because again, the pheromone is still with the dead beetle.
Yeah.
So
put them in a little brown paper bag or something, and then get them out.
Yeah. Get them away. Don't let it fall down onto the ground, or even the dead beetles. Just get them off site. So,
Jen, have you done any beetle picking out there in your landscape?
No, but I probably need to.
They might go after some of the blossoms, like on cucumbers and things like that. But traditionally, they're more towards the flowers and the raspberries and some of the trees that I mentioned. Elms attract a lot of Japanese beetles, lindens, and a few of the perennials, but. They really go after the roses.
Sure.
They love the roses.
So that's kind of a good target spot for you to concentrate your efforts, your visual efforts first, and then move on to some of those others. It is surprising how and I find this out from a lot of folks that I know that enjoy gardening as I do, but they don't get out there and really get into the plants as much as sort of just take care of them. And by that I mean, getting some fertilizer on there, maybe some mulch around the roots, watering, of course, as best as they can and regularly, for the more active gardeners. Mm-hmm. But it really is important to get into your landscape, get into your plants. By that I mean step in there and move some stems aside and take a look at what's going on with that plant. And you'll see those Japanese beetles. You'll see aphids forming if you're just looking at them from a distance and not really paying close enough. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time. You just got to get involved a little bit more visually and actively.
You have to understand what each individual plant's needs are, and if you have the conditions and the willingness to provide those. And in the case of rose bushes, for example, they like a lot of sun, they like, good air circulation, and they like high fertilizing and moisture. So if you keep your roses well pruned and thinned and open, so that you prune them so that the opening in the center of the roses allows for sunlight and air to move, then it doesn't host as much of a beetle or other pest populations as well.
They don't want to be in the sun.
Right.
They
the
want
other
to be
thing I wanted
in.
to mention about Japanese beetles, and some people have done this, is that there is a systemic that can be put around the plants. That the plant absorbs the systemic, and then the beetle doesn't want to. There goes our neighbors are going out onto the lake canoeing.
They got the canoe strapped on top of the SUV. Yep.
And that makes the plant taste inhospitable.
Yep.
There are some concerns. I don't know the validity of this. I know there's research going on. There's always some concerns that some of the chemicals that are used in the systemics could affect some of the pollinating species of insects like bees and so forth.
Okay.
So there's some concern over that. But it does make them inhospitable for grubbing and eating for the beetles.
And we want to minimize as much of that, obviously, and then not have to take as much time. You know,
and honestly,
we want to sit back and enjoy some cocktail time in the garden.
That's right. And honestly, the two quirky winners back to back. This population this summer has been not that. It's been more of a nuisance level rather than a real infestation. At least in my experiences with all the clients that we work with, we're seeing just a few at each site and not this overwhelming. But it's still kind of early. We're at the middle, end of July. But they really, with the early spring, they really should have been full regalia by now.
But I think everything's so healthy. I mean, when you've got healthy plants, we're having an outstanding summer here as far as water, as far as not having long stretches between rainstorms. And so the plants are not stressed out as much. And, of course, a stressed plant is an open invitation in a much larger way to those sort of pests and other things that can malign the garden and malign the plants individually. And they're just, everything's healthy. Yes. I'm just looking out at your garden here, and I'm looking at the front of my house where we did a bunch of potted plants this year, kind of redoing the front yard, so I didn't really want to put plants in the ground because I don't have a plan in place yet. I'm putting sod everywhere and just kind of getting a fresh, clean slate. Speaking of fertilizing and watering like you did with the roses, so Mrs. T planted some sunflower seeds in some pretty sizable clay pots, and now those are about 6-7 feet tall, and they're just lovely. And I've taken some bamboo stakes and then some of the green ties.
She's got some,
and just kind of made it look a little better because they were drooping over here, going to the sun. Anyhow, I've got them looking well. But the point I'm making by bringing it up is those guys are the biggest water hogs on the plant. I mean, my goodness, I'm out there. I do it 3 times a day. Because I got them out on the front of the house, the south side of the house, so they're getting their sun. They are sunflowers. And the pots, like I said, are pretty sizable, but there's 4 or 5, 6 plants in each one of those pots. So those things I'm just watering and fertilizing and watering. And if I go 6 hours without getting them some water, I can see the leaves already started. But that's fun. It's not work. I love getting the hose out there and just helping those buddies out. I even I'm one of those talking gardeners. How you doing, guys? Hey, bud.
Well, you give them
more some water.
You give them more carbon dioxide that way. They like that.
Yeah.
Not that you have bad breath or anything, but they really like the high CO2.
I'm a loquacious son of a gun, so putting a little CO2 right next to those leaves, and they're getting more than their share from me.
Speaking of containers, at this time of the year, people are kind of like, my containers look okay, or they're starting to look a little tired. What's going on? Well, we're in the heat of the summer. We're in the hottest part of the summer, and we have the plants can come under stress. Even if they're getting enough water, they can still come under stress. So what I like to do now is do some pruning and managing of those containers. So cut back some of the legginess on the petunias or the calibrachoas and some of the ivies, the Swedish ivies, and the coleus and the begonias and other things that you put in your containers. And then give a low-level fertilizer. When you have a lot of heat intensity and the plant is under stress, the last thing you want to do is fill it with a ton of fertilizer.
With a big dose.
If you did it earlier in the season, then the plant has been taking. So slow release is probably one of the best ways to go, and to use a pellet form.
Yep.
Slow release fertilizer and broadcast it on the soil. It's not just water activated. Many times it's heat activated.
Okay.
So that the high temperature allows these fertilizer pellets to slowly disintegrate.
Yeah.
So then the plant gets the amount of nourishment that it needs, given the conditions.
Because you can give it a little bit of a shock if you fertilize it too much, especially again in that heat-filled environment. So
now, last year I had a little bit of experiment with our neighbors, and they have a carbonator.
With Jen and Ryan?
Yeah. What's that thing called, Jen? What's that carbonates the water?
Yeah, it carbonates the water, and Bob said, I got to go to the store and I need to buy some carbonated water. And I said, well, why don't you just use the cartridge here? And we'll...
Because you make your own charged water, your own club soda, yeah.
And he put it on his plants, and they perked right up.
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing. There's some research done that shows that carbonated water...
That's cool. I never heard of that.
That it just basic carbonate, it's highly oxygenated, and it does facilitate faster nutrition uptake with the root systems of the plants. And there is a remarkable difference.
I saw it happen. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. So don't go out and buy club soda. If you have your own machine, just
get one of those. Yeah, get one of the charge water maker machines. They're not that expensive. They're fun to have too.
And you talk about no chemicals,
right?
Really. So
isn't that interesting? Just because it changes the chemical makeup of the water enough, and you're carbonating the water. So adding some of that carbon into that's neat.
So that's another one of our little garden.
Again, that carbon dioxide, and then if you talk to it too, a lot, then you're doing pretty well. Hey, let's segue into what I mentioned earlier, Bob, because you were bringing up in a general way that you want to have those Minnesota native plants where you can, and they're going to take on less stress. And I brought up the lake cabin thing, and hearing from a lot of pals that listen to the podcast and have that second home, and they're heading up there, and there's just a huge lawn to get at and just plants that need too much attention. And from a design perspective and from a plant perspective, what are some things that folks that have that secondary home can do to still have a really enjoyable garden, maybe an even more enjoyable living space by that lake or that river or wherever their spot might be, but also have a little more time to enjoy it because it's, a weekend is only so long. You get up there Friday evening sort of thing, Friday afternoon, you got to come back Sunday afternoon for work on Monday. If you can take 2 or 3 or 4 hours out any one of those weekends and not be doing some of that lawn maintenance and having a whole second, landscape to worry about, what are some things that can be done?
Well, I think the question needs to be asked first before any recommendations are given. A true assessment of what your expectation is.
Okay.
So based on the amount of time you spend there.
So
if you're moving to the cabin for the summer, that's one thing. If you're only getting up once a month, that's another thing. If you're getting up every weekend, that's another thing. In line with the other things, because we've owned second properties and understanding all the other things that come into play in terms of maintenance, what expectation-wise, and what is realistic in terms of care. So I would take the approach that most people listening might want the suggestions for things with little or no attention given to them. So put in 2 categories. One is the kind of things that we plant that would be definitely of a native nature. And the reason is because with the natives, there's very little damage done to them generally by wildlife. So that's one thing. As soon as you introduce some exotics, with a few exceptions, you're going to get damage. And I could think of some annuals that, right off the top of my head, I know that the deer don't bother.
I see a lot of hostas at cabins, and then I see a lot of chewed hostas at cabins too, because I think that's a good example of what you're getting at.
Yeah, I and that's the first one that people kind of go toward. Oh, I have, the tidal wave of them in my backyard, and they're taking over my property. I'll just divide them and take them up. But they're really creating more work for themselves and more disappointment.
Yeah.
So I think of things that might give the feeling of hosta or the look that are more native or natural in the landscape. For instance, we like hostas because they have big leaves, right?
Yeah.
Big leaves, and they're kind of showy. Well, let's try Vernera. That has big leaves too, and nothing eats it. That's a hardy perennial. Let's try Ligularia, Britt Marie Crawford, the great big dark burgundy leaves.
Those,
or Golden Ray, the Rocket Ligularia. Those are the kinds of things that when we get a little more natural in our approach, that those things are going to reward us. Plus, they complement the natural setting that the cabin is in.
They're meant to be in that environment.
They're meant to be in that environment. Mm-hmm. If you must have something a little more ornamental, or you're doing some things like potted herbs and tomatoes and things like that, put them on containers. Put them in containers with rollers on them.
Oh, that's
so that
a great
if you have
idea.
to wheel them into your screen porch or whatever while you're gone for the week or whatever, they'll still do fine. They'll still get the sunlight. You water them. Then you can wheel them out while you're there, or at nighttime, even if you're there you want to, provide some protection if they're getting grazed. So I think of all the sedges. The sedge family is a phenomenal array of we have variegated sedges and so forth that will grow that can really give a nice texture. I think about textures that plants provide just through their foliage, not just their flowers.
And a little more critter-proof with the sedges too?
Yeah, the sedges are fine. The fescue family, some of the like tufted hairgrass and some of the grass that take a little more shade that grow in the shade. Mm-hmm. You'll find them naturally in the woods anyway. maidenhair ferns, the whole fern family, ostrich fern, maidenhair fern, princess fern. There's just
again
tons of
and especially if you've got a shady area. I mean, forest plants.
Right. One of my favorite grasses, back to the grasses, the blue stem family. Of course, if you have sunny locations, you can go with the blue stems. You get into a little bit shadier, you go with some of the tufted hair grass that I was talking about and the ferns. But prairie dropseed is a phenomenal plant in that it has this very almost hair-like foliage. It just droops. And then about mid to late summer, it sends up these wonderful, airy little seed heads that are just very attractive and almost sculptural. Mm-hmm. Really, really fun. The penstemons, the native penstemons, are absolutely fabulous. Asters. Now, asters can get grubbed a little bit, but again, they're growing in the prairies and so forth. They're obviously in situations where they are not being bothered. And then Asclepias, which is the butterfly weed, the butterfly flower, the different categories of Asclepias. And right now in full bloom, by the way. So we have the butterfly weed with the orange flowers and the butterfly flower, which, with the tall lavender pom-pom.
And by the way, the bonus obviously being bee and pollinator friendly.
Absolutely. And these are things that take no maintenance. I mean, they're going to establish if it's drought or if it's flooded. They're just going to hang on there and do their job. The Joe Pyeweed family, Eupatorium. Lots of cultivars now of that. If you want to get a little fancy, get one of the chocolate Eupatoriums that has the dark burgundy leaves and put that out, in your garden and contrast something variegated against that. And you've got color, like variegated Ocorus, for example.
Yeah.
Flag irises, those kinds of things you can get in variegated forms.
Minnesota echinacea, a native echinacea would be good, I think, too.
Absolutely.
The cone flowers.
And then the Monarda family. You have the bee balms. You can go native or you can go cultivated. Again, the bee balms are in full bloom right now. Great pollinators for all the different types of bees. And just doing a great job.
But, Bob, the more native you go, if you can find those native Minnesota...
the Veronicastrum family.
They're going to do better in this area.
Yes, Culver's root, a nice 6-foot tall plant. Boy, you plant that out with the bee balm and some coneflower in a garden, and you've got some real show going on.
And it'll just take care of itself.
Mm-hmm. And then you're still up at the cabin in the late August and through the month of September and even into early October in the Solidago family. All the goldenrods will be in bloom. Heliopsis, which is like the yellow sunflowers. Helenium, sneezeweed, love that plant. Plant it near with your flag irises or your chorus.
Sneezeweed.
Or your ligularias, wet areas. The helenium does a great job and really not grazed. The whole iris family I've been talking about. Liatris, the native varieties, generally aren't bothered by deer. Some of the cultivated varieties will be grazed by the rabbits, the lower limbs of those. Geum, we have the prairie smoke flower. Now, again, it blooms very early. You're probably going up to open up the cabin about the time that the Geum prairie smoke pulsatilla is blooming. But it still has those dried seed heads that are beautiful all summer long and planted in mass. So there's a lot of options. Of course, that's what we do at Edelweiss Design. We take all these different site situations because we've designed a lot of cabin-type landscapes. And again, taking into account minimal maintenance, what's going to withstand the extremes and conditions.
And that client needs analysis, though, that front end, like you do with any kind of project in the urban setting, suburban setting, the cabin setting is another one that you have to take into account. As you said at the beginning of this conversation about lake cabins and the kind of plants and design that work, how often are you up there? That's the first thing. And how are you using your second home and the landscape that's around that second home? Begin with that, and then you can go from there.
Now, I have just one last thing to say, too, in regards to, but back here in town, kind of the plant of the day that's been preoccupying my mind because it's in full bloom right now. And it's not heavily utilized. It's an annual. It has a fairly high fuss factor, but it's really worth it. If you have a rose garden, for those rosarians that are listening, and sometimes we get the ebb and flow of some of the different cultivars of roses. Some are floribundas, some are hybrids, some are the hardy roses, and we get different bloom cycles and so forth. I like to intersperse something I feel is very complimentary in a rose garden. A border is always nice. I prefer something white like the Snow Crystals alyssum. Adds a nice fragrance. And then interspersing in some of those holes in the roses, I plant Lisianthus. And people who are in the cut flower industry or work in florist industry, et cetera, they're very familiar with this plant because as a cut flower, it lasts a week
in the
to
vase
2 weeks
a lot.
in the vase.
Yes, it does.
And so I plant them. You can look out there and see the
see
light
them right
blues
there.
and the whites.
Yep.
And you have to stake them as they start to bloom, but they'll bloom forever and ever.
You're going to get some clips off there along the way.
Exactly. And they have the elegance and sophistication of the roses, so they're complementary. You have no scent, so they're not competing scent-wise, but they just fill in some of the gaps. They don't take up a lot of real estate. And
the bloom has a different texture to it, so it complements and also works on its own.
Right. So Lisianthus istomia is the Latin word, and so that's my little rose garden tip for the day.
I like that.
When you're out doing the beetles, you can stake your Lisianthus.
I'm digging the Lisianthus and the alyssum, like you said. That's doing a little border action and a little in-betweener action there. It looks lovely. Bob Harvey, I want to throw some thanks out to your lovely wife, Jackie, for bringing some muffins and getting the coffee ready.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie. We appreciate that. Grant, thanks for taking care of all the numbers and the buttons and the control console here. And Jennifer Dubé, thanks for joining in on the show and sharing some thoughts about your lovely home next door and the conservatory and your enjoyment of that. And Bob Harvey, always a pleasure. We got to do another one of these, couple more of these podcasts, Porchcasts. No, I fit her in there, Bob. Before the end of the season. So just a pleasure being here at your home in Linden Hills. And always a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Thanks. We'll be back soon.
Landscape and Garden Show here on the Alive and Social Network. Thanks for joining us.